Hello, my name is Seth Hanasek, and I'm going to talk to you today about what's great about HotDocs Author. HotDocs Author is the template authoring environment in the newest version of HotDocs, HotDocs Advance. There are a lot of reasons that people automate their documents using HotDocs, but there's a few big important ones. One of the most important is to minimize risk. So when users are creating documentation, oftentimes they're using old documentation, making changes to it, and that opens up the door for a lot of possible errors. By automating, we limit the amount of interaction that the user has when they're drafting a document. We reduce the amount of effort that they have to put in, but by doing that, we also reduce opportunities for errors, and we make the documents a lot more robust and functional. We can also maximize the quality of those documents, again, by limiting the amount of changes that the user has to make. We can pre-approve all of the layout, we can make sure that the branding is consistent, and we can make sure that the documents are of the highest possible quality. And of course, because of those things, we can boost the overall efficiency of the production of documents by reducing the amount of effort involved, by making sure that people don't have to keep rekeying information, and reusing as much as possible to produce the documents much, much more quickly and in much better shape. The way HotDocs does this is a two-stage process that begins with the content author. HotDocs needs content in order to do useful things, and that content is typically in Word format. We take that Word document in its native format and we convert it into a HotDocs template, which is also itself a Word document. So we can retain 100% of the fidelity of the source document and use all of the Word features that make your documents. But we also provide a set of tools that let you define all the changeable parts of that document, and it might take the form of individual data points, pieces of information like names, dates, addresses, amounts, etc. But it might also be sections of the text that are optional or that have different versions of themselves. And we can provide some tools to define the business rules that allow those text changes to happen. And that collection of rules forms the document template, which then needs to be distributed to users. And users will typically consume this template content through a web browser. The template has defined within it something called an interview, and the interview is the question and answer session where we gather all the information we need in order to feed those business rules that tell the template how to change. The interview is designed to be intuitive, straightforward, easy to use for anybody who knows the answers to the questions, and no previous knowledge is necessary, no training is necessary for using the interview. We also have a set of tools that will allow us to not just get the user information directly from the user by filling in the interview, but also by pulling that information from back-end sources, existing databases like customer management databases, document management, business process management, case or matter management, things like that. Custom databases. We can pull all of that information and pre-populate those interviews so users don't have to rekey all of that information again. And we can use combinations of those things. But regardless of how we're getting all of that data, once we've gathered all the answers in the interview that we need, we can pass that into our document assembly engine, which will produce a draft of the relevant document with all the right information in all the right places, with all the right layout and structure and formatting. And we might produce a single document, or we might ask a series of questions to produce a set of related documents. And of course, we also capture all of that data for use and reuse in the future. Now I'd like to demonstrate some of the things the HotDocs can do and how it does them. HotDocs Author is presented in this format. The screen that we're looking at is called the Workspace Explorer, and we organize all of our templates using these workspaces. When we want to edit a template, it opens that template in Word, and it provides us with a field editor over here on the right-hand side of the screen. And the field editor lets us interact with the document and identify the changeable parts that we'd like to modify. Most of the time, that refers to a question and an answer. So when I want to add some information to the document, I have a placeholder in the document here, just a text placeholder. This is just text that was typed that says buyer name. So I want to replace all of these bits of text with a HotDocs placeholder for the name of the buyer. So I can select one of these pieces of text, and this might be a sort of a tag like this. It might be part of a precedent document, or it might be someone's actual name. We just need to select the text we want to replace and then add a HotDocs placeholder. And we have different types of placeholders depending on the types of questions that we want to ask. We can ask questions that expect a text answer, or numbers, or dates. We can ask yes/no questions. We can also ask questions that provide the user with predetermined options to select from. In this case, I just want a text question about the name of the buyer. So we give that a name, and HotDocs will let me know that it doesn't exist yet, so I can create it. I can also link it to a dialogue, which is just a collection of questions. And if I already have a dialogue, I can pick that dialogue and it will add my question to it. And then I need to replace the text that I highlighted with my new HotDocs placeholder field. And I can either do that once by clicking this add button, or I can tick the box that reads replace multiple and then replace all of those tags in one step. HotDocs will tell me how many times it found and replaced the relevant bit of text, and it replaces those with my HotDocs field. These HotDocs placeholder fields are connected with this field editor in real time. So as I make changes, they're available immediately. And the field editor is context sensitive. So if I click in an existing field, it will show me the details of that field. And if I make changes to it, those changes happen in real time. In addition to adding these placeholder fields, we can also change the way that they're displayed. So one of the key principles of document automation is separating the formatting of an answer from the data that generates that answer. So here I want the price that I'm selling for. And this is going to be a number question, and I want that to behave like currency. So I'm going to select this placeholder, or sorry, select this text and add a HotDocs placeholder, which is going to be a number variable. And I will call this price. Anytime we create one of these questions, we can edit its properties and make sure it behaves the way that we want. In this case, I want it to behave like currency. So I can make sure that 2 decimal places get displayed, that the user is allowed to enter 2 decimal places. I also want to add a $ next to the question so that the user knows as a prompt that it's meant to be pricing information. And I also would like their answer to be formatted like currency. So there's a bunch of built-in formats that we can apply to any of these questions, and the type of format will depend on the type of question. So number formats are available for numbers. We have date formats for dates, etc. I'm going to select the currency format for this number so that every time it appears as a currency amount with the 2 digits of change to the right. When I'm happy with all of those properties, I can close this, and that updates immediately. And then I can add my field to the document. But of course, once I have this information here, I also need the same answer just before it, but I need it spelled out as text. So we can reuse any of these questions, adding placeholders, by selecting from existing variables or other components that we've built from this list. So I can select my price variable that I used previously, but I can put a different format on it. So every time we use a variable and add a placeholder to the document, that placeholder can be formatted differently. And crucially, the user doesn't need to know any of this information. They just need to be able to answer the question, and the template will determine what the correct format to apply in the document is. So I'm going to select the one that spells out a currency as text. The field will indicate that I've got a special format applied. And this, we have now 2 placeholder fields that reference the same number question, which will only be asked in the interview 1 time, but it'll be reused twice, and it'll be formatted differently each time. In addition to asking questions and getting the answers from the user, we can also calculate new answers from those questions. Here, I have the amount of a refund, and that refund is calculated by multiplying the price times the decimal version of the discount. Anytime I want to calculate a value, I do that by creating a placeholder for a computation. And we'll call this refund. And then we'll edit the computation by using this edit button. Now, HotDocs has built into it a very robust scripting language that lets us do all kinds of interesting, complicated, powerful things. We can do text manipulation, we can do date calculations to figure out what day of the week it's going to be 60 days from today. We can do complex logical checks, we can affect the behavior of the interview, we can format our answers in lots of different ways, but we can also do mathematics. So we have a set of building blocks or tools over on the right-hand side, and then a scripting window on the left where we can adjust the script that we want to build. And we just want to build a mathematical expression. We need to tell the computation what type of result it's going to produce. In this case, it's going to produce a number. And then I want to take the discount, and I want to divide it by 100 to produce a decimal version of the discount. And then I want to multiply that by the price. It's worth noting the script editor is syntax aware. So as we type or as we add items by dragging and dropping them, HotDocs is watching what we're doing. And if it notices something that it doesn't understand, it will indicate that with this wavy red line. And if we mouse over it, it will actually give us an error message that tells us what the problem is so that we can fix it. In this case, I've got a component that's misspelled and it can't find it inside my list over on the right-hand side. But if I correct the error, it updates itself in real time. Because this is a regular math expression, I'm going to make sure, I'm just going to use some brackets to make sure that this percentage gets calculated first. And at any point, I can test my computations to see if they do what I expect them to. So it will generate an interview in exactly the same environment and display it in the same way that an end user would see it. It asks the relevant questions within their context, and I can enter the details of the information that I need. So if I put in a price of $5,000 and I add a 10% discount, my result is 500, which is correct. And of course, I can try a different discount and check that result as well. And when I'm happy, I can close that test and go back into my script. The last thing I want to do is make sure that this gets formatted like a currency amount, because that's what it's going to be. So I can do the same thing that I did with my number. I can go into its behavior and change its default format to a currency format so that every time we use this computation, it'll appear as currency. And then we just need to add that field to the document. And this refund will get calculated, but the user won't see any additional questions. It will just use the answers it gets from the other questions, calculate that answer, and put it straight in the document. In addition to creating all of these questions, which are a straight one-to-one relationship, we ask a question, we get an answer, we place it in the document, we can also set up conditional sets of text, which will modify the structure of the document. So this paragraph is actually dependent on whether or not we want to add this particular social media-based discount or not. So we can select this paragraph and create what's called a conditional region. And we can base the condition on whatever we like. We can check the value of a text variable. We can check some date variables to see whether they're earlier or later than another date. We can check numbers to see if they're greater or less than or equal to any particular total. We can also just ask a yes/no question. We can create a yes/no question about the social media discount, and we can check to see if the answer is yes or no, whichever is appropriate. In this case, it's yes. I can create that question and add my field, and it will add an if statement before the text and an end if statement after the text. And if the condition is true, it will leave that text in the document, and if it's false, it will strip it out. So we can create optional versions of text. We can create conditional text like this that is either present or not. We can also create different versions of text using a special instruction called an else statement. So we can have different variations on a particular piece of text depending on the user's answers. And through the use of these if statements, we can actually make one template that contains lots and lots of different versions of itself depending on how the user answers the questions. And the conditions that we can create run the gamut. These are the simplest conditions that we can have, but we can also create computations or other scripting expressions to extend out the complexity of those conditions to check whether certain questions have been answered at all and whether those answers fall within particular ranges and how they compare to one another. So we end up with a complex decision tree that will collapse down to the correct answer based on the user's inputs. Any business rule that you can conceive of that would allow for a particular change to happen or not in a document can be defined using these tools in HotDocs. HotDocs is capable of lots of powerful things. This is just a taste of the sorts of things the HotDocs author can do, but it is a very friendly environment. It's easy to pick up. It's designed for non-technical users to learn how to do in a short amount of time with very little training. And there's lots of tutorial materials that are available if you want to learn how to use HotDocs Author. In the meantime, join us for the next of these videos to learn a little bit more about the sorts of things that HotDocs Author can do. Thank you very much for your time. I hope this has been useful to you. If you would like to learn more about HotDocs Advanced and HotDocs Author, please contact us on our website at abacusnext.com, or you can email us at hdinfo@abacusnext.com. Thanks.